All right, Kyle Morgan with Blue Bearing Solutions, Safariland Cadre, and this is a pro tip video on target transition. It's key throughout the narrow all the way through the wide transitions that you get your eyes in front of the gun, meaning that when I present to the target and I'm transitioning, if my eyes aren't out in front of the gun and they're in line with the gun as I'm moving across, you can get away with a lot on a narrow transition, but the wider of the target transition, the more you'll see tendencies of if you end up shooting past and then coming back. When you do this on targets, if you see a tendency for your first shot to be just off the right or left side, depending on which way you're transitioning, it's because your eyes aren't out in front of the gun just slightly, and you're surprising yourself. So much of the basic fundamentals of marksmanship rely on your ability to build a steady position from the ground up, all the way up through the pelvic cradle here, and keeping your core intact. If I'm transitioning and I twist my core here to be able to do the transition, you can hold that for a little bit of time. You can muscle that for a little bit of time, but you're never going to be consistent, and you're going to fatigue because bone fatigues way slower than muscle. So you want to rest on your skeletal structure as much as possible, keeping your core intact. So I'll start with 2 shots left, then and transition 2 shots right. This is a build-up, right? So when I'm working on target transition drills, start narrow and really try to pay attention to that, even that little bit of a movement to transition, that you're driving the gun with a lot of force, but you're getting your eyes out just ahead. I'll do that 5 times, and then I'll start transitioning 2 shots right, then 2 shots left. All right, so for this one, we put out 2 AC zone steels. These are Grizzly target steels. They sell AR 500, 600 steel quality stuff. The reality of this is I went from that narrow transition of about a foot on paper, right? You can get away with a lot and muscle through that very quickly, and it's not going to really amplify poor technique until you start to increase the distance of that target transition. So these targets are about 6 feet apart. I start just 2 shots left, 2 shots right, do that about 5 times, and then start working 2 shots right, 2 shots left. As I'm building this up, I'm using targets of the same height, right? So I'm not having to change my elevation as I'm transitioning through, so I can really drive the gun, keeping it on level all the way across. Now you can add layers of difficulty to this where you have different heights and elevation and smaller targets and things like that, but this is a really good drill to just build a base on your body position, your eye movement, and gun speed, keeping the targets on the same level. So I'll go 2 shots left, 2 shots right, and pay attention to, I'm gonna set myself up to present to this first target, right? I said 2 shots left, so I'm gonna set myself up. I'm squared up to both targets so I can transition through regardless of how wide they are, but then I drop down and present to him first, not compromising my core here. So it's minimal, but if you really focus on this, my eyes are just slightly in front of the gun, and that's allowing me to present to the first target, and then I know I can make that transition because my body position is set up to deal with both. I'm going to shoot this 5 times or so from left to right, and then I'll do the same thing coming back the other way. I think the other thing to highlight too is for almost all the drills I do, especially if you're by yourself, I use a pro timer, because if I want to really push myself to perform on a timer and not just like come up here casually and say, all right, ready, set, go, or in my mind, all right, draw, go. It adds a layer of performing under stress of a timer, and it really helps you find out where those spaces are that you need to work on. So, and obviously it counts your shots, your splits. I'll be able to tell From first shot, 0.96. The split for the first to second shot was 0.18. The target transition was 0.23. So that's the time it took me from my second shot to my third shot. And then my shot split between 3 and 4 was 0.15. The next thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna put the targets out at about a 15-foot separation and kind of demo some of the body position stuff that I do on a wider transition. All right, so for this last target transition that I'm gonna demonstrate, we've pushed the targets out to about 20 feet or so between the two AC zone steels. You know, obviously you have to work within the limitations of the range or where you train at. Understand that if you are limited to just being able to do maybe narrower target transitions, the dry fire piece of this is huge. I can set these targets up in a room and do the same thing working in my home. So if you see the targets, they're 20 foot apart or here or so, I'm still gonna try to, if I can, I'm gonna set up myself up to be in the center of both of them. I'm gonna drop into my body position and you'll see me exaggerate. I'll drop one of these knees to help me drive the gun to be able to keep my core. I'm able to, instead of having to twist my body across to engage, you may get away with it a few times, but it's not a proper body position to be able to engage. So that's where I drop my knee as I'm drawing, and then I'll drop the inside leg as I'm transitioning across from left to right here. If I'm presenting to this guy on the right, I'll drop this inside knee, the right leg in this case, to be able to keep the gun on the same level and transition through the targets, keeping my core intact. If you're really pushing the speed of how hard you're driving the gun, if you don't get your eyes out in front, this is where you'll really see it, because you have momentum that builds up and you'll start to see moving just past the target, and maybe your first shot's off to the right side of that target and then you come back. So if that's something you notice, it's an eye movement issue. So you have to get your eyes just in front of the gun. That was a really good demonstration of my eyes were they weren't ahead of the gun enough, but they weren't so far in line with the gun that I moved off of the target. And the reason I'm highlighting that is because between those two runs, the second one, I hit, the first shot was on the right edge of that AC zone steel. If I didn't have them even just slightly in front of the gun, I would have passed that steel and had to come back, and that shot would have been a miss. So start paying attention to some of those things as you're doing it, and hold yourself accountable to it. And like I said, we're not tanks, we're not tank turrets. We're not on a hydraulic system that we can, so it's critical that we utilize as much of our eyes ahead of the gun. And I can exaggerate this when I'm demonstrating by doing, I'll present to the target, move my eyes, gun, eyes, gun, eyes, gun, eyes, gun. I'm exaggerating that for this because I don't need like a massive, head movement, but my head is moving and it's just in front of the gun. Really, as you're practicing that, try to force the gun, with some speed, get the gun out and try to force it, and then see what it's like when you don't get your eyes in front of the gun and try to force it at the same speed in a dry fire kind of hot gun dry run in this example. Just see what happens to the sight picture. I guarantee you, if you're doing this with any force, you're gonna move past the target. Now I'm gonna start with the right target. So as another progression, I like to throw in a forced slide lock mag change in between the target transition. So this allows you to work on the same things we've been talking about in this video, and now breaking that sight picture while you're continuing to transition the gun and presenting it to your next target. One thing I highlight here is, as I'm doing this, like, I don't want to drop the gun down in this level. I want to maintain that piece of consistency across as I'm changing mags and presenting to the next target. So quickly shifting my focus from the base of the mag well back to that target of where I'm going to be next. This is a great drill to do in my own just firearms flat range work buildup, but then how this equates into the shoot house is paramount, because now I add shooting on the move while I'm transitioning targets as I'm collapsing my primary sector of fire, and still establish a steady position. Big takeaway, eye movement, push the gun speed, measure it with the part timer, and then work on presenting your hips. You can do the same drill with a rifle. I just push the distance back to where if you're shooting paper only at any distance, but just keep in mind shooting steel with 5.56, you make sure you're using the right type of rounds, and you're paying attention to the distance you are from that target. I hope you enjoyed this video. There's a lot more of these videos that are going to be coming out from Safariland Cadre in the Pro Tip series. If you're interested in training with Blue Bearing, we're based out of North Carolina. Look forward to seeing you guys next time, and let's continue to train.